Hi, this is Mark, the Malicious Carp with the Rapscallion Brigade. Today I'm bringing you a classic Malicious Carp Success or Fail video. This one was one of my earlier attempts, and I absolutely did not speak during my working times. So I'm bringing you this wonderful director's commentary style video. So the goal of this project was to add tactile switches to an Atari 7800 Painline coffin controller, and the Atari 7800 Painline had a lot of issues that really make them difficult to play games with, because the design was to have that. If you can see in the video, there's that donut shaped piece of foam. That was kind of the main spring in the system, and that would degrade over time. I've bought a few of these that were new old stock from Best Electronics, and even never having been used, that foam disc was just completely degraded because of time. I had one where it was like this little stale cookie that had no give to it at all. And I had another one where I opened it up after playing one game, and it was all just dust in there, really gross foam dust. So that kind of, I don't know what they worked how they worked back in the day, but now they're kind of garbage. The push buttons actually had really nice springs on them, but that was limited to only being the push buttons. So the goal of this project was to add some micro tactile switches. There I'm showing there was this. The way the buttons worked was to have this plastic packing tape film over the circuit board with little blobs of looked like solder on it, and pressing down on that would make those cover the traces. There I'm using tactile switches from my local Radio Shack before they went out of business. I think that this video would be the first and last time I used new Radio Shack parts in a video. You can also see on my bench I picked up my Radio Shack soldering iron. That was actually a pretty good soldering iron for how cheap it was. They're showing how small the switches are. I should know that my camera has trouble focusing and I need to pay a lot more attention to what's on the screen, but that's another story. So the goal of this project was to add tactile switches to actually make contact across the traces on the board, and that would make it so that you wouldn't have to jam onto it to make that packing tape with solder blobs method work, and it would also add a little bit of springiness back to the joystick. Uh, Looking back, I also should have probably thrown an actual spring in there, but that is another story for another day, I suppose. So what I'm doing right now is seeing how the tactile switch uh, matches up to the board itself. I want to place it on there so that one half of the switch is on one side of the trace and the other half is on the other side, and pressing the switch would make contact. So I'm just kind of sizing it up and placing it around all the different traces on the board and seeing how it lines up. I'm also kind of noticing that the traces on the switch are a little longer than I'd like them. Um, I kind of wanted the trace or the leads on the switch to come down and be flush with the bottom so that it wouldn't be standing off the board at all. I wanted to have the switch resting on the board, if at all possible, so that when I pressed on it, it wouldn't move around and pull up the solder, break the solder joints and whatnot. Alright, I'm getting the safety glasses on, so this is getting serious. Cracking open the new soldering iron. Ooh-wee. So for being such a cheap soldering iron, that actually served me pretty well. In fact, I still have it and I still use it occasionally. But now I recently picked up a really nice soldering station, so you'll start seeing that in my videos instead of this old trusty Radio Shack one. I'm also wearing the Radio Shack Lands End employee shirt. Oh, there's my diagonal cutters, I guess. I had to show those off. Because I had actually worked at Radio Shack for a while when I was in college, and then I decided to buy a couple of their uniform shirts because I thought they were actually pretty nice. And now I just have them and use them for when I'm working on electronics. I know, that's the story of the year, right? Okay, back to the camera. This is also before I still haven't figured out a good way to position the camera. Now I have it kind of on a tripod on my workbench pointing down. What I really should do is actually build a rig for it, but whenever I start working on that, I kind of get distracted and forget what I was working on and end up working on something else altogether. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of putting a piece of electrical tape under the switch so that I can position it on the board and hold it in place as good as possible while I'm soldering it so that it doesn't shift around. I don't have to... I can be a little more careless because it's actually being held to the board. And I think I was also covering, because those tactile switches have 4 leads, and so they're pairs, one for the one side of the switch and one pair for the other side of the switch. And I didn't want to use the pair because that would risk making contact with other traces on the board that I didn't intend to. So I was basically lining it up so that I only had one trace making contact at a time. What am I doing with that block of wood? Oh, okay, I'm making it so that the board can lay flat on the workbench. Okay, and grab the business end of the soldering iron to see if it's heated up. That's a very, very classic move there. Alright, and now I suspect you're going to be treated to some blocked views of me trying to solder. And you'll also notice that I didn't season the tip of that soldering iron or anything. At the time I had been out of practice for a while, and my technique was even more lacking than it is now. Alright, so I made one connection, and now I'm repositioning the switch to do it again. Alright, and proper ventilation too. It would be nice if I had a hood vent or something, but since I don't, I just kind of use a little desk fan pointing in the general direction of my soldering. and that's usually enough to blow the smoke and stuff away. I do have an exhaust vent in my workshop, so I do have fresh air coming into the room, but it's nice to have a little extra fan to blow away the crap when you're actually soldering. So when the flux burns off, you get this little smoke thing that's probably not the best to inhale in the world. Alright, I think I made my first connection. Got my first switch mostly soldered down and going back for a little more. So I can't see what's going on at all, and I know you can't either, so I'm just kind of trying to guess, knowing how I do things. Alright, now I'm trying to make sure that the switch is actually adhering to the board properly. I'm sorry, I also have a cold, so my voice doesn't sound great, and I'm having to mute a lot for coughing, so hopefully I catch all of them and don't subject you to that. Alright, I also noticed that I didn't pre-tin anything, so probably got to try like 3 or 4 times to make this soldering work. I've actually learned a lot since then by watching videos like Ben Heck did a great tutorial on how to solder, and BigClive.com does a lot of really good instructional videos, and his soldering technique's really amazing. So at this point, I had done a lot of electronic work in like high school, but not much since then. And I was mostly trying to get back into it here. So this wasn't the first project I've done, but it was one of the earlier ones, and I can totally see that my techniques changed since then, and this would probably be a lot easier to do now. Alright, it looks like I'm moving on to switch number 2. Boy, this is exciting. And you'll notice that my workshop is in my basement, so my videos always have a lot of squeaky people walking around upstairs noises, which is wonderful. Alright, lining up. Doing more lining up. Alright, going in for the solder. Alright, it looks like I've tacked one side down, and I'm going in for the other. I can't stress enough, I should have pre-tinned that soldering iron. That tip barely lasted me at all because I didn't keep it clean. You can see I don't have like a sponge to wipe it off on, or one of those steel Brillo pad type things to clean it, and that tip just got so much corrosion on it, it quit working pretty quick. And that was more of a lesson learned for me. Alright. There's two. Yay! Oh, continuity check. Wow. That is my cheapo Harbor Freight multimeter. Now, I'm going to do a little foreshadowing here. You think that as long as I had that out, I would have just verified that the switches worked the way I thought they did. But we'll save that for part 3. Alright, I honestly have no idea what I'm measuring right here. I do still have that cheapo Harbor Freight multimeter, and it frankly does get the job done, just not very well. I really should upgrade that, but that's for later down the road. Alright. What am I on, number 2 or number 3? This is a really bad camera angle here. I am just watching in stunned silence, trying to figure out what I'm doing in this video. Alright, looks like I already got this one lined up, and I'm going in for the solder. Alright, let's see here. Come on. Yeah, it looks like... What, like that's number 2? Alright, in the end I might end up cutting this or speeding it up, because really you cannot see anything. What was I thinking with this camera angle? Well, I suppose that's how you learn. Now it looks like I might actually be putting down solder where I'm going to be putting the next switch, maybe? Alright, and it looks like I'm cutting up more tape to mask off and hold the next switch properly. And I don't even know if I still have this controller laying around. Oh, that's good. Have the soldering iron's wire hit the business end of the soldering iron. That won't melt the insulation at all. Anyways, I think I still have this controller laying around. I'll have to give an update on it. Because I honestly don't even know if I finished filming this video. It would be interesting to look back at some of my old work and see what I think of it now. Watching this video, I think it would be very amusing. Alright, going in. Holding that soldering iron on the board for way too long. And adding a little bit of solder. Alright. Yeah, it looks like I'm lining up the fourth switch here. And I'm getting ready to solder that down. Alright. Go me. Now I'm testing to see if it pushes the buttons as expected, if I line them up where they should be. And I'm noticing that there are some bumps on that joystick that makes it so it can't really... It looks like it'll wreck the buttons if I leave those nubs on there, so I'm cutting all the nubs off because of the added room of having the switches there. Alright, and try it again. Alright, now it looks like I'm moving on to the actual push buttons themselves. And I believe, oh, okay, yeah, there were four duo packs, so opening second pack of them, and looks like I'm doing the exact same technique where I put some electrical tape on there, on the bottom, stick it to the board, and solder it down. All right. I also think I decided to just pull that board off completely because it's a lot easier than having it tied down with all those wires. And if I remember right, like one of the switches had like green and yellow, and the other one had like yellow and brown or something like that. And so just taking a note of which switch is which. And I did used to have a piece of paper taped to my desk that I could just scribble notes on. Um, I should really go back to doing that, but now that I have more junk on my workbench, I don't really have as much room for it. All right, untangle. There we go, and going right in for the solder on that one. All right, come on, move, I can't see. Just have to take my word for it. It's magic. I'm not actually soldering there. I'm using magic to attach it to the board. You can't see it. You can't prove anything. A hush falls over the room. A very large man attempts to solder a very small switch onto a medium-sized circuit board. And it looks like the operation was a success. And now he is moving on to the second board. He is currently fidgeting with wires that should be disconnecting. And now he is doing something indiscriminately, having blocked the camera with his massive shoulder and arm. Now he is doing something else in the hushed silence of his workshop. Sounds of chair scoots, footsteps, and other people coughing and talking fill out the ambient noises of the workshop. Alright, looks like I'm getting the last one all taped up here. Alright, and a little more soldering blocked from the view of the camera. I could have at least straightened my collar out on my shirt. Oh well. And Alright, come on. Show the camera something. Oh, right. I think I almost saw some soldering happening there. And I think I've said in the video a total of 2 words. This is very, very compelling content, people. Alright, I'm unplugging the soldering iron. And it looks like we're coming to an end of part 1 of this video. This is Mark the Malicious Carp with the Rapscallion Brigade. Links to everything this amazing group does are in the show notes. And it looks like you'll need to stay tuned for part 2. Thanks for watching.